guys, I'm Kazim Rizvi, exercise expert. Before I begin, I'd like to tell you a little bit about myself. I just graduated with a bachelor's degree in exercise science, and I've been a personal trainer for 3 years. Now, in today's video, I'm going to be talking a little bit about aerobic training and its benefits. But before I get into all that, I'd like to answer a question that most of you, if not all of you, have been wondering. And that is, are carbs really bad for you? Well, to answer your question, it really just depends on your physical activity level. For instance, someone who engages in higher physical activity levels, such as athletes, will burn a lot more carb calories than someone who's sedentary. Well, what happens when you become sedentary? Well, when you become sedentary and you continue to consume carbs, those carbs then get converted and stored as body fat or stored energy, which can lead to a lot of potential health issues such as metabolic syndrome. Well, what is metabolic syndrome? Metabolic syndrome is just a general overall health issue that is comprised of 4 potential health risks, right? And those are obesity or being excessively overweight, hypertension or high blood pressure, hyperglycemia or high blood glucose levels, and or dyslipidemia or abnormal cholesterol levels, which can be associated with having either high levels of LDL cholesterol or low density lipoprotein cholesterol, or low levels of HDL cholesterol or high density lipoprotein cholesterol. But how can we manage all these risk factors? Well, let's take a look at the board here under the aerobic intensities and their associating benefits, right? So let's start with the lowest level of intensity, which is 40 to 60% of aerobic training. Here, you're burning fat. So what happens when you burn fat? You reduce the risk of obesity, or you reduce obesity itself. So yay!
Yay!
Yay! We all don't have to run anymore. 69% of moderate aerobic intensity. We have aerobic endurance. And aerobic endurance is essentially maintaining your aerobic fitness. But alongside with that, you also are beginning to utilize carbs. And why is that a good thing? Because you begin to increase your insulin sensitivity, which means now you are reducing your risk of hypertension and hyperglycemia, right? Or you are reducing hypertension and hyperglycemia themselves. Now, in this last level of aerobic training, the highest level of aerobic training at 90 to 100% intensity, you benefit the similar things, right? You are burning carbs, and you're increasing your insulin sensitivity in order to reduce the risk of hypertension and hyperglycemia, or you are reducing the hypertension and hyperglycemia themselves. Only difference is you are now engaging in aerobic development, which means that unlike just maintaining your aerobic fitness, you are now developing a higher capacity for oxygen uptake. So now you're uptaking more oxygen than you did before. And why is that good? Because now in other physical activities, you are able to utilize more oxygen in order to work more efficiently, all right? And now last thing to keep in mind about these benefits, these are all chronic adaptations, which means that you have to be working at each of these intensities for days or even weeks in order to get these benefits. Now let's take a quick look at these graphs over here. We'll begin with the top one. So this top graph that you see here is what you would call the crossover concept graph. So at the bottom here, you have the percent of aerobic intensity, and at the far left, you have the percent of fuel or fat or carbs being utilized, right? So why is it called the crossover concept? Well, as you can see here, at about 60 to 65% of aerobic intensity, you have this crossover here, right? Crossover concept. Well, what occurs at this crossover? Well, to put it all together, this graph is basically saying at about 60 to 65% of aerobic intensity, you are beginning to stop utilizing fat and you begin to utilize carbs, right? So that's why at about 40 to 60% of aerobic intensity, you are optimally utilizing fat. Now, you're also probably wondering, How is it at 0% of aerobic intensity I am able to utilize 100% of my fat stores? That's not necessarily true. What this is basically saying is, as I continue to reduce my intensity, I am continuing to increase my fat utilization. Or in a more general picture, it's just showing the continuation of the relationship between the intensity and the percentage of fat utilization. But this is not necessarily true. It's all theoretical, because if it were real, we'd all just be sitting around shredding it right off. That'd be kind of nice, actually. Now, down here at the bottom, we have this other slightly more intimidating graph called the VO2 graph. And what the heck is the VO2? Well, a VO2 is essentially the amount of oxygen being metabolized or utilized at a given rate during a certain intensity. Let's check it out a little bit closer here. So as you can see, at 100% of aerobic intensity, and all this is my personal data, by the way, at 100% of aerobic intensity, I am uptaking and utilizing or metabolizing oxygen at a rate of 47 milliliters per kilogram per minute, right? Which is just the unit of metabolic rate. But you guys really don't need to know exactly what your personal values are, because there is a unique formula called the Karvonen formula. And the Karvonen formula basically goes your maximum heart rate minus your resting heart rate times the desired intensity that you wish to work at, plus your resting heart rate added back onto all of that. So let's check mine out, right? So let's say I want to burn fat, right? I want to burn fat at 40% of aerobic intensity. Well, how do I find that? Well, my maximum heart rate, which is 194, I got that by subtracting my age, which is 26, from 220. So 220 minus 26 gives me 194 beats per minute. Now my resting heart rate, which is 58, I found that via iWatch or iPhone. But if you don't have access to those, you can always check your pulse, and that's also perfectly fine. But my personal resting heart rate, like I said, is 58 beats per minute. So 194 minus 58 times my desired intensity that I wish to work at, and in this case 0.4 or 40%, and then add back on my resting heart rate. So when I compute all that together, I get about 113 beats per minute. And what is that saying? Well, that's just essentially saying that if I work at or around 113 beats per minute, I will be automatically be working or metabolizing oxygen and therefore fat at a metabolic rate of 19 milliliters per kilogram per minute. And again, you guys don't need to calculate or figure out or know exactly what that exact VO2 is for yourself personally, because once you find that associating or target heart rate, you will be automatically working at that metabolic rate. Cool, right? And one last thing about aerobic training, a couple of recommendations is that when you're doing low to moderate intensity, it's recommended that you do those 30 minutes to 60 minutes a day, 3 to 5 days a week. And as far as the higher intensities, those should be done 20 to 30 minutes a day, 2 to 3 days a week. All right. And like I was mentioning earlier about the aerobic development and its benefits for resistance training, well, the reason why it's so beneficial for resistance training is because, as most of us know, our skeletal muscles or working muscles need oxygen in order to work more efficiently. So if we develop a higher oxygen uptake capacity, we will be able to feed our working muscles more oxygen, and therefore those working muscles will then begin to work more efficiently. And that's also pretty cool, right? Now in my next video, I'm going to be talking about periodization, and specificity, which is helping all of you develop an appropriate resistance training routine that's right for you. But as far as this video is concerned, if you have any questions, comments, or concerns, feel free to comment down below or email me at krizv8@gmail.com. And again, I'm Karvonen, exercise expert. I'll see you guys next time.